You are now tuned in to Go Time Dolphins with Charlie Touche and Kadeem Simmons, the Miami Dolphins podcast that's for the fans and by the fans.
Gotta make them lose their mind when it's your time. And it's show time. Going all out when it's go time. I ain't wasting no time. Gotta make them lose their mind when it's show time. Cause it's your time. Lay it on the line when it's go time. Don't waste no time.
Oh, I just realised I got my background lights on. But it doesn't matter. It is week 18. The Miami Dolphins are travelling to MetLife for a MetLife takeover in what could be the final game of the season. Lose and they do not make the playoffs. Win, but the Broncos win. They do not make the playoffs. The only way for the Dolphins to make the playoffs is to win and hope that the Kansas City Chiefs can do the Dolphins a favor. We paid them the favor that, was it 2019 the Dolphins gave them? That sounds about
maybe
right.
Yeah.
But regardless, here to delve into all of that and more is 5YardLee from the Dolphin UK podcast. And I just realized, Lee, you never told me my mic was far away. So I'm speaking.
Now your mic's turned off altogether.
Can you hear me better now?
I can hear you again now.
Yep, and I can't hear you because this is an awful start to a podcast. So, Lee, while I do this, tell everyone where they can find you.
You can find me in the Dolphin UK podcast on all the socials, and wherever you get podcasts from, you'll find us there.
And then keep talking because I still can't work this out. This is really bad. So instead of having dead
The good
air,
news is we can hear you.
can even hear me for like 30 seconds, please.
I'm pretty sure we can do that. Kadeem's gone. Cool. 5-yard takeover. Just because. Kadeem is currently on the doubtful list. It's almost game time. Call him Teron Armstead when he comes back. We can hear you.
All right, I think I'm back. All good?
We can hear you. We can see you.
You absolutely perfect. I keep moving my laptop and just shuts everything down. So apologies for that. And apologies for the bad start to the podcast. Hopefully the Dolphins do not start off in similar fashion. Right into that game against the Paper Planes. We know that Tua Tagovailoa is questionable to play, which basically means he's doubtful.
Doubtful.
It probably means he will not play.
Don't be getting people's hopes up like that.
Me and you have had plenty of discussion about this situation, and you have it's not a unique take, but what is your take on the way the Dolphins have handled this to a hip injury over the past week now, basically?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a unique take. I'm just super confused, and I feel like maybe I'm confused in a different way to everybody else. It seems the undeniable fact is he's hurt. That's fine. Like I'm not. This is not me having a go because can't play or is hurt or anything like that. It's more to do with how Mike McDaniel is phrasing it in his press conferences. Even as of today, he's unlikely to play. Now, when we see Tua talk to the media after that, it sounds pretty clear that he's not playing. But we had this dance last week where he suddenly gets downgraded to doubtful. Then it's going to be, well, let's see what happens when he takes the field, is what you hear from the national guys. Obviously, at that point, the team are no longer putting out stuff. So, there's obviously a clear distinction there. It doesn't sound like anything's actually improved this week. We've seen some media clips of him. But when they say light passing, I mean, it didn't even look like a warm-up, did it? Like, he's just tossing the ball around.
Yeah.
And then Mike McDaniel says today he's unlikely to play. I wonder, I'm not sure why are you using the word unlikely when Anthony Walker is just out. He was out last week. He was doubtful and then out. He's still doubtful today. Does that mean coach is still holding out some hope that he plays? It just seems a weird way of phrasing it.
What I found interesting was that they didn't even do the whole questionable to doubtful to out. They kind of skipped the questionable and went to doubtful. But like you said, they could have just gone out. And I think the fact that they didn't go straight to out must mean that there's still a 2% chance. And I think with Anthony Walker, even if there was a 2% chance, like, listen, there's no point. No, because like Teron Armstead, they give Teron Armstead until the final opportunity to say whether he can play or not. What's interesting is that I'm sure there will be people out there saying, well, if he can throw the ball, why can't he, stand behind the pocket and all that kind of stuff? And that's completely fine. If the Dolphins could basically say that he was never, ever, ever going to have to move, if that makes sense. And that could be as simple as moving up in the pocket or, swiveling your hips. And, it's easy to stand there and just go like this over and over again. He's a lefty, so he's going like this.
Me and you can stand 20 yards apart and throw a ball to each other. That's not...
Yeah, but it's okay, so I've, caught the snap here and I've got to do this. That's even just doing that. That's my hip, being activated. I took GCSE PE. No, I didn't. I didn't take GCSE PE. That's an absolute lie. So yeah, I think it's the interesting thing will be. I said the interesting thing is for me. Tua spoke to the media today and said he's playing in the playoffs no matter what. So if he knows he's able to play next week, despite the fact that he's not the one stopping him from playing this week, what's going to change between now and next Saturday, for instance?
And he said he wanted to go last week.
Yeah. And I think that's probably where this frustration, outside of the frustration of he's once again not available or probably not going to be available in a key moment, it's the coach is saying he can't play, or the medical staff saying he can't play. He's saying he can play or he wants to play, and that no matter what, he's going to play next week. But you don't know how this hip is going to flare up or whatever, because it sounds like from what coach is saying, it's not a muscle injury, it's not a bone issue, it needs rest to get better. And unless he's spending the entire, outside of that one clip or two clips we've seen of him throwing, he then spend, getting massages and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's just annoying that we are speaking about this when we should be talking about how many points we're going to put up against a paper planes team that doesn't care no more. And, whether the Chiefs can do us a favor and beat the Broncos. It is a shame.
It is a shame, but that's the world, unfortunately, we found ourselves in this week. The only thing I can say is hopefully we find ourselves in the same position next week where we're talking about, is he going to play or not?
So, question for you then. Huntley plays on Sunday, as we are all expecting. He wins, and he puts in an even better performance than he did last week. Are you tempted at all?
No. No, I'm not tempted at all. Unless he suddenly looks like Tua out there, I'm not even close.
So the question I was going to ask, and Lee knows what the question was going to be, is would you be tempted to start him for the playoffs and say, hey, Tua, this is Huntley's team. He got us over the final line, and we're going to ride a hot hand. I can't think of an example where the starter gets benched. Actually, no, I can think of an example. Baltimore Tua, where he had the bad finger, it's benched for the game, and then the quarterback can't get it done, so Tua has to come in and win the game. Can you see that happening, or is it if Tua is available to play, he's starting against what is likely going to be the Buffalo Bills next week?
I like the way that you put it. Should we ride the hot hand? His hand would have to literally be on fire, and I hope Tyler Huntley wins. And I thought he showed a lot of improvement last week from the games that he started early in the season, and that's that's to be expected, isn't it? He needed to improve, but he was put in a tough spot in the first instance, coming straight to the team and expected to start. So great, made the progress that you'd want as a backup quarterback. How much difference do you think his performance is to Tua? It's still a long way apart. So if you have an option of putting Tua in there in a safe manner, you have no choice but to do that because it increases your chances of winning significantly, in my opinion.
Yeah, and again, people are entitled to their opinion. I will never say the opinion is wrong. I would just disagree with it. I've seen people say, you play Huntley from now until whenever you get knocked out of the playoffs, assuming we make it. And he deserved this. He deserves opportunity, and I think Tyler Huntley wouldn't say no to the opportunity, but I think even he would know for the Dolphins to go far in the playoffs, or even win a playoff game. Tua probably is their best. What am I looking for? Not example. He's their best
chance.
Jesus, wow, Lord.
Wait.
So
Okay.
Cap says, "Gentlemen, let Huntley play. Tua is toast." And yeah, I can. Cap, as you hear, if both healthy, and that's a massive if. So Cap, if both are healthy, would you start Huntley over Tua? Or are you saying start Huntley because you think Tua is now done? That's because, again, I think, or I would find it hard to believe that anyone can see Huntley's entire NFL career and Tua's NFL career and say when both are healthy and available, that Huntley is better than Tua. But again, because of, his ability to scramble, then here's what it is.
I mean, look, I suppose part of that calculation is going to be gathering more data on Sunday. For this to even be a problem means he has to have won the game Sunday against a better defense, even if they're not necessarily playing their hardest. They still have an opportunity to knock out a division rival. A bunch of those players aren't going to be there, so it doesn't really matter for them if they hurt their chances at a draft pick. They're not going to be there to worry about it. So, the Jets team on paper, and as we saw a couple of weeks ago, is a far sterner opponent than the Jets. Or a far lesser opponent than the Jets are going to be. So, the equation does change because he's going to add another performance to it. But, it's also a much tougher task than what he was given last week. I don't think they can afford to get off to the same first half start as they did last week, where they still seem to be figuring things out, in my opinion. It still wasn't clean, for sure. But in the second half, they obviously looked a lot more comfortable. I didn't think they were ever in danger of losing that game. But in the second half, it definitely felt a far cleaner operation all round.
Yeah. Cap says Tua can be the backup, worst case, if we advance further with Huntley. Like I said, the only way I can see Tua being a backup next week, if the Dolphins advance, would be he's still trending towards not being fully healthy. But again, it's the playoffs, you've got nothing to lose. But then it's that situation again where, okay, say you chuck in Tua and he gets the job done, but he makes it worse. Question: what if the Dolphins and Broncos both lose or tie? I think if both teams lose,
Dolphins are knocked out.
Yes. And also the Bengals as well. So if the Bengals win and both teams lose, then the Bengals would advance in the playoffs. So if the Dolphins and Broncos lose or tie, but the Bengals win, so the Bengals need to better both the Broncos and the Dolphins, where the Dolphins just need to better the Broncos, and the Broncos just need to better.
That's it. And if everyone loses, the Broncos go through.
Yeah. So I hope that answers your question. I guess what's also concerning potentially would be the lack of Teron Armstead. I'll just go over the injury report now as I've got it up in front of me. Teron Armstead is questionable. Calais Campbell is questionable. Friend of the podcast, Javon Holland, is questionable. Tyreek Hill is questionable. Obviously, Tua is doubtful. Jaylen Waddle is questionable. Anthony Walker is out. And D. Eskridge is questionable. And then for the paper planes, Tyler Conklin is questionable. Sauce Gardner is out, which is, I don't know if it's a good thing for the Dolphins, but it makes it somewhat more interesting, I guess.
Didn't play the last one, did he?
He didn't know. Morgan Moses is questionable. Elijah Verataka is questionable. Quinnen Williams is questionable. And Leki Fotu is doubtful. So, yeah, interesting that. And what could be the final injury report of the season? And I hope not, because I do enjoy doing them. So, I guess also, it's a question I asked you on the phone earlier. I didn't get your answer, so I will ask it now. Walk with me. The Dolphins lose to the Paper Planes, to the New York Jets on Sunday. Do you think Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins, would fire Mike McDaniel? And I asked that because when he fired Brian Flores, no one saw it coming. The Dolphins lose to the Titans. They missed a chance to make the playoffs, and Chris Greer fired him. Stephen Ross fired him. It was a shock to everyone. And him doing so again, I think, not for everyone. Some believe that he has it coming. But yeah, can you see a situation where Stephen Ross fires the head coach, Mike McDaniel, on Black Monday if the Dolphins lose to the New York Jets?
I don't think it's likely. Could I see it happening? I mean, the Dolphins would have to implode pretty badly. It had to be very dependent on the situation. Do you know what I mean? Again, this is kind of like the Tyler Huntley answer, where everything that precedes it kind of doesn't matter. It's all going to be based off of one game. I suppose if the question is they get beat and they miss the playoffs, does he get fired? I've got to say no, because they can win and miss the playoffs as well. So, okay, let me ask you, if they win and miss the playoffs, does he get fired? Because now it looks like a team that could have gone to the playoffs, but you managed to not make it to the playoffs. That would mean with Tyler Huntley, you were able to beat the Jets, but you still lost to, which games did he play in? The Colts, the Titans? Seahawks,
and the
sorry.
Titans.
He played in two of them, didn't he? Not one of them, I think. So, but yeah, anyway, you see my point.
I think, I think it's unlikely that Mike McDaniel loses his job on Black Monday, regardless of whether the Dolphins win or lose, regardless of whether they make it to the playoffs or not. But like I said, I was just thinking, we've seen this happen before in Miami, and we've seen it happen in Miami within the last 5 years. I don't know. I don't think I'm trying to make sure that I'm not surprised for whatever happens on Monday. We had the last episode we did, and also a short came out today as well. Today being Friday. If one had to go between Chris Greer, Mike McDaniel, and Tua, who would you pick? And people have different answers. Some people say Tua, some people say Mike McDaniel, some people say Chris Greer. Others are saying all three as well, and I can see a case for all three of them. I guess my next question will be then: if Mike McDaniel is fired on Monday, does Chris Greer follow him?
Yeah, I think if that was to happen, I think there's probably a good chance that they're both gone. I don't think Tua goes, but that's just because of the contract situation, because of the way you extended him. I think it's very hard to move on. I mean, you could always draft a guy and sit him. That's always an option, I suppose. It's not a great option, but if you're that desperate to not have him on the field for you, then there's that. But I mean, I mentioned this to you the other day. I don't like this idea of cleaning house and getting rid of everyone, because I think you fail to realize where the actual problem is. Do you know what I mean? How many coaches did you hear interviews from yesterday where you then saw a news report come out and it said ex-Dolphins coach? Because you let all those guys go because you were going through multiple coaching staffs. So if you think it's a GM problem, move on from the GM and see if the head coach can succeed with a different GM. If you can't, you know it's a head coach problem and that you shouldn't have got rid of the GM, but you've now changed GMs anyway, change the head coach. But you're changing too many parts of the equation to actually get the answer. Do you know what I mean? I think if you change everything, you've not really learned. You've just decided to go back to ground zero. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's fine, but you're just as likely to get it wrong again, and you still won't have the answer because you'll have a new coach and a new GM, and if it fails, you'll be sitting there saying, which one is it? Because I don't know because I changed them both.
Yeah.
So you need a constant, just as a measuring stick, to figure out which, where your issue is. And then I think if you look at the teams that have competed in Super Bowls over the last decade or so, those guys have all been in place for a long time. And that doesn't mean they've been successful every year. That means there's been some downs and there's been some ups. That you've been to back-to-back to the playoffs back-to-back years under Coach McDaniel and under the GM. And week 18, you still have a possibility to do it again. I mean, I think if you make it 3 years in a row, especially with the injuries taken into account, it's very difficult to do that. It's whether the owner blames the injuries on the GM or the coach. If he does, then he might make that change. But I just don't see how you blame the injuries on the coach. I can see how you can blame giving the contract out on the GM. So that would be my route to it. I would keep keep Mike McDaniel, keep Tua, change the GM, see what changes. But
Caps.
It happens all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like GMs and head coaches go through these lulls.
Cap says if McDaniel wins Sunday with 3 quarterbacks in 3 years, coming back from 2-6, it would be difficult to fire him at that point. Hell, he might be coach of the year. And I think and again, this isn't my opinion. It's opinion of many in the fan base you see all over social media. It's not the fact that it's 3 playoff appearances. It's the fact that it would be no playoff wins. So I guess in the scenario they get fired on Monday, he didn't even make the playoffs. But I think fans are just annoyed that it's like, if the Dolphins continue this record of not winning the playoff game, it's like, you keep on hitting the ceiling, and it's trying to, break through that glass ceiling. I was just going to say, you mentioned ex-Dolphins coaches and stuff like that. And it's interesting seeing Ben Johnson talking this week about coming up against Brian Flores, and Ben Johnson being in the building up until Brian Flores came in and said, please leave. Then you got a failure or a number of failed offensive coordinators, and Ben Johnson goes on to, look like he's going to get, his choice of whatever head coaching job he wants next year. And it's interesting how people are furious with the Dolphins for letting Dan Campbell out of the building, but are completely silent about Ben Johnson. Personally, I think a lot of people don't even realize that Ben Johnson was with the Dolphins. But yeah, what do you make of Ben Johnson as a coach? And again, I asked that because it's just, again, you mentioned how these ex-Dolphins coaches are, up for, if not a head coach already, up for potential head coaching jobs. And one of the, I guess, new offensive gurus was in the building for quite a while.
I think it's difficult to make any sort of assumption, isn't it? Because at the moment, he's still doing an offensive role. It's exactly the same reason you hired Mike McDaniel. It's exactly the same reason you hired Adam Gase. And if you fire Mike McDaniel, like, being a good offensive coordinator proves very little. Being a good defensive coordinator proves very little until you can prove that you can do the head coaching job. Everything is semi-educated guesswork. Do you know what I mean? You can't know, because if you did, finding head coaches would just be a way easier job, wouldn't it? And GMs, but it's not that easy. We've seen it. I was talking to friend of mine who's a Jets fan earlier, and he was talking about some of the candidates that the Jets have come through. And we landed on, like, if I was him, and this is what I thought during the Mike McDaniel coach before he got hired, I would have hired a veteran coach where they can learn, where they hopefully have learned from whatever mistakes got them fired the first time. But, you know, it also brings its own set of challenges. They got fired the first time. Good chance, you know, that there's no guarantee they've learned.
Yeah.
You know, I think Rex Ryan's a good coach. But I wouldn't say after his stint with the Jets, did things get better? Not really.
Really, no.
Do you know what I mean? But say that's the risk you take. It'd be easy for me to sit here and say, yeah, cool. I'd love Ben Johnson as a coach, or I think he's going to be a great coach somewhere else. That's just guesswork. All you can say is he's doing a really good job now and deserves his opportunity to coach.
Yeah. I feel like it's interesting how, off the top of my head, you don't normally get a coach go from, you know, franchise to franchise as a head coach like you do in, you know, UK football, where managers can just bounce from like one team to another. Maybe because there's enough teams to do it, but it's like they can fail over and over and over again, but walk into another job where it feels like in the NFL, if you do get head coach chance and it doesn't work, it's like, hey, you know, you got to go be a DC or a head coach again and then work your way back up. No, I find that really interesting. And, you know, Ben Johnson, like I said, I can imagine I can imagine a few Dolphin fans didn't even realize he was in the building. I know I've seen a few who would be like, you know, bring Ben Johnson home, all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, you know, the people saying, you know, the Dolphins should have never have left Dan Campbell leave the building tend to kind of not talk about Ben Johnson in the same breath. Now, obviously, Ben Johnson hasn't won a single game as a head coach, but I don't know. It's definitely interesting, definitely fascinating, and one to look out for. Also, yeah, I think it's probably best we head into bonus time. Before we head over there, though, Lee, Huntley starts on Sunday. Roger starts for the Paper Planes. What is your score prediction?
21-17. I think Tyler Huntley finds a way to get it done. I am forever the optimist. I choose to continue to believe because, as I'm pretty sure I said to you last week, the off-season is a long time. I would rather look forward to a Dolphins game and look forward to hopefully cheering on a win Sunday rather than taking the negative angle. So, as usual, I'll predict Dolphins win.
Yeah, so Charlie on our last episode and on Patreon as well believes that if Huntley does play on Sunday, the Paper Planes will win. I am inclined to agree with him. I don't think it'll be a blowout, but I can see it being 23-19 to the Paper Planes. The thing that holds out hope, which it is, I think the last defensive performance against the Paper Planes was somewhat of an anonymous. Shout out to Hannah Montana. She says Charlie looks pale today. Clearly says 5YardLee under. And also, after spending like a week of him in Miami, surely you know the difference between 5YardLee and Charlie now. But yeah, I think the defense will step up this week where it didn't the last time these two teams met. And I think that I'm hoping the Dolphins offense can give the Dolphins defense enough rest to make sure that they aren't, you know, giving up long sustained drives to the Paper Planes. But I don't know. If Tua was playing, to me, there's no question the Dolphins win this game. I think even a checked up Paper Planes team on Sunday against Huntley would love nothing more to just ruin the Dolphins season. But as we all know, none of it could mean squat if the Broncos beat the Chiefs. And if that happens, the Dolphins could win 100-0. And, they're still not playing football next week. So, listen.
I think it was really interesting to see how Coach Weaver attacks this week, having seen the Jets once before. He said that he didn't feel like they managed to execute their game plan that well. He's done a good job. The Dolphins' defense is going up the NFL rankings. I'm really interested to see how they play against them. They could keep them in this game, but they need to find a way to run the ball because in Miami, they just couldn't find a way to get that run game going. And Tyler Huntley with no run game is a recipe for a bad afternoon.
It's definitely one to look out for. Stay with us for bonus time where I ask Lee a question about this Miami Dolphins defense. So again, thanks, Lee. Lee, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Twitter at 5YardLee or X, whatever you want to call it. It's fine. I find a Football Fan UK podcast on all the normal podcast platforms. We're pretty much everywhere, but come over, chat Dolphins, join the WhatsApp group just for fun. And Hannah, make sure you keep watching that Burger King advert.
I need to test the one that went to say you will later on. But guys, until 34 seconds, we shall see you soon. Peace.
Gotta make them lose their mind when it's your time. And it's showtime. Going all out when it's go time. I ain't wasting no time. Gotta make them lose their mind when it's showtime. Cause it's your time. Lay it on the line when it's go time. Don't waste no time. Gotta make them lose their mind when it's your time. And it's showtime. Going all out when it's go time. I ain't wasting no time.
So you mentioned the defense. You mentioned how it's improving. And Coach Weaver was asked about his potential head coach in opportunities. He said he focused on the Dolphins, X, Y, and Z. How much of a loss would it be for the Dolphins to lose Coach Weaver, given what we've seen from him this year?
It's an interesting question because I think if you asked most fans based on performances to tell you where the Dolphins defense ranks, I don't know if you would pick the top 10. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if it always passes the eye test in regards to there's still a lot of missed tackles, but they are superb on third down. I think Coach Weaver's given the right answer. You just focus on your team because then someone will come calling if they want you. Do you know what I mean? You're not chasing the job. If he was to leave, I don't know if I'd be that worried because I think you'd plug Coach Salah in. And I think you'd do it pretty quick. And I think the reason you'd do it is because he brings some other head coaching experience and a working relationship that you know, I know it's worked out fine with Coach Weaver. It didn't work out last year when Coach McDaniel brought in Vic Fangio. So you take that element off the board. We know that he can coach defense. The Jets' defense has been good under him when he was a head coach. That's not the problem. This is exactly what we were talking about in the main show there. Just because you're a good DC doesn't mean you're a good head coach. But we know he's a good DC. That's not a question.
Is there any reservations from the Dolphins end that Robert Saleh is primarily a 4-3 scheme and the Dolphins have been running 3-4 for quite a few years? Now, you know, it could be as simple as, okay, you know, Chop Robinson, who, to be fair, mainly plays with his hand in his dirt. So hands in the dirt. Hand in his dirt, Lord. You know, it's mainly you're looking at your edge rushers, always hands in the dirt, you know, rushing as opposed to standing up, all that kind of stuff. Or, you know, that's just a super, super, super basic, you know, difference between 3-4 and 4-3. And probably it's even more basic than that. But do you think there's any reservation from the Dolphins for that? Or is it a matter of, listen, these guys have played in multiple defenses and actually we can make it work because these guys are adults and we're good to go?
I think you just get the best guy in to do the job and worry about the rest later. I think every time you bring in a new DC, there's going to be some sort of changes in philosophy. We know it. We saw this year, Dolphins signed a whole bunch of plus 330-pound guys to play D-line. Most of them didn't really pan out. But that was a staple of what Baltimore tried to do. That's what you inherited when you got Coach Weaver. We know that they like to try and play a lot with the defensive backs. We've seen Javon Holland not have his best year. It's obviously not. I don't think it's necessarily been in his favor. So you see, the pros and cons. Like we mentioned the other day, even on offense, playing the 49ers a couple of weeks ago, you can see all the stuff you inherited by taking a coach from that system. You inherited all the similar problems. So, yeah, I don't know, really.
I don't
think it'd stop you.
I think what's interesting that people are calling for continuity in keeping Coach Weaver. And it's kind of... Was that so?
Don't get me started.
But I think what's interesting is if the Dolphins don't make the playoffs, it's because the team as a whole failed. And, you speak about, okay, well, Tua let the team down by not being available, or, coach let the team down, blah, blah, blah. 2 games immediately spring to mind. Cardinals and Buffalo. The Dolphins left the field with the lead and never got the ball again because the defense failed to hold up to its end, basically didn't get the necessary stops, walk-off field goals. And I think people talk about continuity and all that kind of stuff. But it goes back to they want continuity for things that they like, but not for the whole team. And I think if the Dolphins, if you want Weaver to stay, surely to be fair, it's not that simple, but if this defense, which for a lot of people doesn't pass the eye test, can't tackle, rarely gets turnovers, why are you wanting continuity there and not across the whole team? Again, as I was saying, I find it quite interesting that, people now clearly like Weaver, so he's the one that gets to stay. But if you're going to get rid of, or you speak about, not hamstringing a new GM to this head coach and quarterback, well, why do you, make him keep?
So you can't.
Or if Mike McDaniel goes, why is the new guy going to come in and go, well, fine, I'll keep Anthony Weaver? Like that wasn't that part of the issue when Mike McDaniel came in the first place, and we kept. Who was the DC when he came in?
Oh no, yeah.
It's not Brandon Graham. It was.
God, his name escapes me. I can see him as well.
As I googled that, but do you know what I mean? It was.
Yeah, of course.
People were annoyed that the Dolphins were hiring a new head coach and making him keep the old DC, but you want to clean house but keep the DC. Like, again, let's be consistent.
If you're on the side of cleaning house, you have to clean house completely. I don't think you can, because otherwise, if it doesn't work, it's going to be, the Dolphins just took a half measure again. It's like, no, if you want to clean house, clean house. Go on.
Josh Boyer.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It feels like, if you want to make a change, clean house, fine, but do it properly, because otherwise you're just going to moan that it's a half measure. I am in the favour of, and this comes to the head coach and the GM. I had a disagreement in your group that you set up the other.
So it's my group now. Thanks.
Hey, it's all your fault. With Phil, and Phil said to me that some people just want change, and I thought about what he was saying, and the funny thing is, I think if you want change, the irony is that you need to keep the GM and the head coach, because what does everybody do? The first sign of shit hitting the fan, They fired a GM and they fired a head coach. It's what every team across the league does. Over and over and over. It's what this team's done. How about you ride it out with one? How about you fully see it through? You trust the process. You understand that you've signed the quarterback to an extension and you ride it out based on that extension. So you say they've got the next 2 years, whatever it's going to be. And look, if this is considered a bad year, you're playing for to get in the playoffs in week 18. That's like in context, that is a bad year. The Jets, who were by all media accounts destined to go to the Super Bowl, where are they currently picking in the draft?
Currently picking 7th overall.
Currently picking 7th overall. We're supposed to be going to the Super Bowl. All of their problems are going to be solved when they got their quarterback back. We're not in that boat, are we?
No.
So it just feels like, I say, ironically, I think if you want change, the biggest change would be to ride it out.
What I'm looking at as well, and what's quite interesting, is the Dolphins have had, is it 17? 14 head coaches since 1966. Since Don Shula's 26 years in charge, no coach has managed or coached for longer than 5 years in Miami. And I say that again because it's interesting, because that goes back to what you were saying. It's constant change. So it's obviously Don Shula, Jimmy Johnson, 4 years, Dave Wannstedt, 5 years, and then you've got Jim Bates, interim, Nick Saban, 2 years, Cam Cameron, interim, Tony Soprano, 4 years, Todd Bowles, 1 year, Joe Philbin, 4 years, Dan Campbell, interim, Adam Gase, 3 years, Brian Flores, 3 years, and Mike McDaniel currently has 2 years. Just chopping and changing since the year 2000, trying to, win a playoff game, basically, has you constantly, chopping and changing, and it's not doing you any good. Before we get out of here, Lee, one more question for you. You've seen the stat about Tua's red zone efficiency. Was it 47 touchdowns, 1 interception in the last 3 years? Does that sound correct?
I think that's right, yep.
Do you know who his sole interception came against? And I will give you a bonus point if you can tell me the year, and 2 bonus points if you can tell me the week.
Jesus. Well, I'm not getting 3 points, that's for sure. Red zone interceptions. It was the New York Giants. It was 2 years ago, and it was week 8.
You said the first 2 so confidently.
Do you know why? Because I suddenly realised I was at that game. And now I think it was earlier in the season than that, but I was at that game.
I'll give you a second chance. If you think it's earlier in the season, when do you think it is?
I usually fly out in October. Let's say week 5.
3 points it is. New York Jets 2 years ago, or 2023, and a pick 6, funny enough, just before halftime.
Yeah,
it was
trying to get ball to Waddle.
I thought it was Hill.
I think it was Waddle. Doesn't matter anyway.
No. This definitely matters. Before we get out of here, this 100% matters. Go to YouTube. Miami Dolphins v New York Giants. 1 year ago, but I'll give you the 2 years because we're in 2025. We're going to have this advert for Fiverr. Shout out to Fiverr, you've been really helpful recently. And we have another advert, despite the fact I just played into the video. I don't want trading strategy to master. Let's have Dolphins are 14 up, 14-3. Get to the red zone. And it is a throw to... Yeah, Jaylen Waddle is what it is. No, it is. Yeah, It's because Tyreek Hill at the bottom of the screen, but no, it's a throw to Jaylen Waddle, which is just not on whatsoever. And that was the last red zone interception he threw. And to be honest, he's probably not going to throw another one this year. So, yep, there you go. 3 points when you didn't think it was possible. And the Dolphins won that game to go 4-1. That was only 2023, and yet everyone wants to blow it all up again. So, Lee, thank you for filling in for Charlie. Hopefully, we will see you again relatively soon. If I had to guess,
game proof for next week.
Even if Charlie's around next week, no, he's not. Or is he? He's here on Monday for the Paper Planes review. So until the next time, we shall see you soon. Peace.